Hey y'all. Hey y'all, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. I'm Dr. Brianna Whiteside, and today we are wrapping up Octavia Butler's rescinded text or out of print text, Survivor. Y'all know this is a collector's item. I actually broke the seal open just to read it for this class, and it is going right back. It's going right back into the plastic once I'm done with it, but I did want to see how it felt to read this text, and especially with such small print. Like, I know the PDF that I shared was small, but this feels so much smaller, and the book is so much smaller. And so it was definitely an interesting reading this book, because y'all know I read out of, where's the pattern series? I read out of the collected works, the Seed to Harvest. So it was really fascinating touching an individual book that has not been reprinted. And this copy is actually the 1978 copy. So this is the copy that was originally published in 1978, which is fascinating. But yeah, so welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course, y'all. We are, 4 books in to Butler's work. Next week we start Clay's arc. And I'm hoping you all would be able to see why I put Survivor right before Clay's arc. Because has anyone started reading Clay's arc yet? Because if you did, you will notice that there is a significant jump from Mind of My Mind to Clay's arc. But Survivor, we are wrapping it up. I was just looking at the replies on the Substack. Let's see. See, Maisha said, I'm looking forward to rereading it because I will understand it this time. Exactly. This is my argument. If you move from Mind of My Mind and you're immediately dropped into a universe where there's an alien virus that is turning people's bodies into something else, it will disorient you. I argue that it diminishes the impact of Survivor or people's experience with reading Survivor. So that's just my argument from my Easter speech. I'm very interested in what y'all hear. What y'all hear. Sorry, y'all. I'm a little tired and I'm getting sick. I'm very interested in what y'all think about Survivor now that we're done. Of course, I was looking at some of the chat on the Substack, and some people were saying that, it felt a little rushed, and it did. And I do want to start this class off by reading from the book Octavia Butler by Gary Canavan. He's a scholar in academia, and he wrote this book based on his time at the Huntington Library. And so this is one of the earliest books that was written on what's all in the archive. Just in case you cannot make it to the archive, you may not be able to get access, you can get Octavia Butler by Gary Canavan. I believe you should be able to get it off Amazon. But I do want to read, generally I read from Butler's thoughts, but I do want to read from his thoughts because I think they're important. Let's mix it up. Let's switch it up a little bit before we hop on, and that way we'll give more people time to hop on. As y'all are on, y'all, can y'all like this live? Can y'all tap the screen as part of the participation in this course? I would greatly appreciate it. Okay, so bear with me. My sinuses are acting up. I'm a little tired, but I wanted to hold this class tonight. All right, so Gary Canavan says, and just to remind you all that Butler rescinded this text because she said that it was not a good story. This was her Star Trek novel, but deeper into the archive, she was under some financial pressure. And if you all read Octavia's First Astronaut, the article that I wrote with Mellis and published in Mellis, I think it was in 2023, I tried to kind of synthesize all of the information early on as to why she rescinded the text. So hopefully you all were able to read that academic article, because I tried to ultimately make a case that Survivor should be reprinted, and it is an important book to the Patternist series. Okay, Gary Canavan's notes. He says Butler's problems with Survivor went beyond the advance, and he's talking about the financial advance that she received from her publisher. She had already felt skittish about her Pattern Master sale, and she frequently directed people to read Mind of My Mind first or instead. She even suggested that Doubleday, who is her publisher, not bother trying to get an endorsement for Pattern Master from Harlan Edison, to wait for Mind of My Mind, thinking he would like that one better. Now in 1978, she was already telling people not to read Survivor either, as it is a good story told badly. In part, in fact, she privately blamed Ellison, saying the book had been better before it was revised to his suggestions. She actively discouraged people from reading the book, knowing that this only encouraged them to seek it out, and blocked its reprint and publication for the rest of her life. When Niecy Shaw got Butler to autograph her copy of Survivor, she inscribed it, "Niecy, I wish you didn't have this one." Butler felt the book's assumption that beings who evolved on different planets would be able to have children together was embarrassingly scientifically naive. The reason she called her book a Star Trek novel, despite having been a lifelong fan of that franchise. But she felt also that the book was simply not finished when she sold it. Years later, she would say that she sold the book primarily because she needed money to get to Maryland in order to research the slavery novel that would eventually become her world-famous Kindred. So I just wanted to read from Canavan, who kind of just, validated what I said was Butler's reasons in the archive as to why she sold the book and why she rescinded it. I think another reason that scholars don't like to talk about is that she was romantically interested in Harlan Edison, her white male editor. And I think that that could have had something to do with it as to why she went along with some of his suggestions, because she was romantically interested in him. So I need to start reading the chat. But yeah, so I think that, that could have had something to kind of do with why she was okay. With, the edits that he suggested to kind of appease him. Eli says, I didn't like the time jumps. It kept confusing me. Well, if you didn't like the time jumps here, you're not going to like the time jumps in Clay's art, because they go back and forth, past and present and future. So be prepared to be jerked around by your neck, okay, in Clay's art, because it goes back and forth. All right, y'all. What y'all think? Do y'all think it should have been rescinded? What are y'all thoughts? What are y'all feelings?
So I don't think it should have been rescinded. After the last meeting, I finished the book the next day. So, I just read straight through it. It was easy. It's an easy read. It's not, it wasn't too complicated or whatever else. And I did not like the way it ended, because it just ended. It just was weird. I was so concerned about, oh my God, maybe I don't have the right PDF, because I ended up getting the PDF from the other place as opposed to the download from you. I went back and looked at the download from you, and it was like, I'm like, this is how it ends. It's crazy. I think that the level of detail and sophistication that is the hallmark of Octavia Butler was lacking in the book. And I do think that it probably would appeal to a whole lot of other people, just general audiences, because you don't have to think that much when you're reading this one. Yeah. Whereas what I find one of the reasons I love Octavia Butler, why she's my favorite author, is that I like to read an author with, I can't take any one word for granted. Because if I just kind of half listen to it or whatever else, I'm going to lose something. Mm-hmm. Because she doesn't just present something just to be out there presenting. So I could see where somebody else's hand was in this book as opposed to everything else I've read from her. It's a definite different thing. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't her as much as her as I'm used to.
When you say that, I think about, because when I think about Survivor, I immediately think about Pattern Master. I think Pattern Master is the worst book that she has ever written, which is her first published attempt, right? It's the first book of this series that she ever published, but it is the last book that we will read in story in order of narrative plot. but I did not. I felt that this was slightly better than Pattern Master, which was published in 1976. Did you read Pattern Master?
Yeah, yeah. I've read all of the books along, like a while ago or whatever else. So it's kind of hard for me to keep on top of each book. I read everything she's ever written, so if I can get my hand on it, I got it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the issue that we're having also, and this is for new readers too, we started at one of the tops, Kendrick, right? Her
Yeah.
most well-known work, and we have descended into a series. And so that could be a thing. And also when we read Wild Sea, y'all remember it was published in 1980. Then we went to Mind of My Mind that was published in 1970. And then we went to Survivor that was published in 1978. But also remember, you wouldn't remember because you wouldn't know this. Butler wrote Survivor before she wrote Mind of My Mind, but it was published first. So Mind of My Mind was published first, right? So since we read Mind of My Mind, we should also read it with the understanding that that was the third book she ever wrote, which we see her work getting progressively better. Um, yeah, 1978 with Survivor. Yeah, okay, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay.
Yeah, I think again, I just it's just not as like I can remember the fledgling, which is a whole different book or whatever, in terms of just like that prose and how just rich it was and all the rest of it. So I did like it, so I'm not gonna say that I didn't like it. I did like it. I just it's something I would like I said, I read it very, very, very fast because it just flowed pretty easily to me.
Hmm.
Um, and as somebody who's a huge fan of Star Trek, I have nothing. I see nothing wrong with species intermingling. I don't understand why this is an issue. I don't understand why it's an issue for her
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it is a well thought out trope, especially in paranormal or speculative fiction romance novels. It's always getting known. That
Um,
always happens.
y'all know that ain't my thing. I talked about bad last week, but that ain't my thing. So it was weird to me, but that we are about to encounter some other weird stuff in her works. And also, I want to say that Survivor was her first published attempt, which I said in the Mellis article. Without Survivor, you wouldn't have gotten Dawn, adulthood rights, or Imago. You wouldn't have gotten it because this is Butler's first attempt at where she's trying to articulate or think through what life would be like in space. So while a lot of people love what's her name in Dawn, not Lily. Lily? Is it Lily? What's the protagonist in Dawn? Y'all know. Anyway, while people love her, I think it's Lilith. While people love her in space, you won't be able to appreciate Lilith without seeing where Butler came from with Elena. Y'all know what I'm saying? Okay. All right. Anybody else want to go?
I agree with what Tina said. Good evening, everybody. I think it was like it felt like an outline more than her finished product. It again, like everybody's saying, it felt rushed. It lacked the depth in her prose wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything that Tina said. I have no notes. It just felt like she just here, damn, and then I was like, okay. But then how you explained it with the order of things and how it was published, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, y'all. Here is why I make the case. I'm not a creative writer. So I saw someone in the chat said this looked like what a fifth grade creative writer would write. Dang, that's brutal. Um, but I had us read this text because of the narrative flow, right? And even if it wasn't her best shot, sure, it may not have been her best book, but the narrative is important to the series. And this is the first time we're starting to see her deal with science and not just time travel or fantasy, because Kindred is a work of fantasy, according to Butler. Okay, Maisha, what you got? You want to say something?
So I like the book. I do think it was rushed and not well thought out in the end because I kept thinking about the other people in the South, and I just knew that the missionaries were not going to survive. But I felt like this book changed my perspective on Butler because in the past I felt like, oh, I love her, she's this sci-fi writer, she's black, and I really kind of like idolized her. But now looking at her books, she's always writing books that end with a lack of hope, and relationships are so turbulent, and there's a lot of loneliness in her characters, like a lot of loneliness, and there's not a lot of moments of happiness or togetherness with other people. It's just like this character and what they're doing, and there's a lack of love, and I felt like it's a reflection of her life, and I felt really sad for her. um, and I just have a different perspective on her because of these books now.
Well, I didn't mean to change your perspective. But I totally understand what you're saying. And you have to, I feel like when I'm looking at Butler's work, you have to go find the hope. Like, it's not like, okay, well, what's the alternative? Like, what's their payoff? The missionaries did get free. Okay, Elena did get to be back with her husband after all of that. Like, you have to find that glimmer of hope and find something to hang on to. That's just like if you're reading, it is a very complicated text to read by Tony Cave Barra, The Salt Eaters. If you've ever read that text, it's confusing, but you have to find the thread that you're going to hang on to read it. And I do agree, as I said, I told you all, Butler wrote herself into these narratives. And as you said, Maisha, that it was probably a reflection of her life, 100%. She is lonely. She is trying to imagine what it's like to be loved or to feel love. She is, of course, as I said last week, that she is also writing through her comfort with her appearance. She's writing through what it's like to be considered unattractive, what it's like to be a large woman, what it's like to be someone who is political. So she's working through a lot of things in Survivor that I don't think she works through in her other texts, because I feel like the Patternist series was maybe a cathartic series for her, a series where she's like a therapeutic series where she's kind of working through some of the traumas that she's dealing with, so that when she gets to the Parable series, this is kind of like an intellectual quest to me, or an intellectual and spiritual quest. And then especially when we get to posthumanism with the Xenogenesis trilogy, I feel like she's worked through a lot of that stuff and she's able to advance forward, or look to the future in some type of way. But I get what you're saying.
And it was that scene where Alana talks about being beaten by what's his name, Do It. And I was just like, this feels out of place. Why is he hitting her? Nobody else is getting beat. Like, why does she have to be beat when they already have been a welcoming people to incorporate these different beings? How do you go from being welcoming to an extent to beating someone for their difference? It just felt out of place. And I just felt like, and this may be because I'm a therapist, sorry, but I just felt like she's like, she doesn't have some good perceptions of relationships. Like, every relationship is not going to be so toxic. And so I just felt a little bit sad after reading her depiction of Alana. But I loved Alana, and I loved the different roles she played. And I probably relate the most to Alana and throughout all the characters in her different books.
Yeah, I think, when you were speaking, it reminded me, y'all saw that TikTok trend that was going around talking about the man or the bear, that whole thing that people were asking. And I think if we're going to apply our present day lens to it, she's showing you, if you choose the bear, it's still going to be something here, right? The relationships with the other. These are humanoids. The Garcon and the T-Coin, they are humanoids. June, July says Team Bear. They gonna rise up too. But I think I don't know, that's something that she's kind of trying to think through, right? Even with in Wildty, yes, Doro, everybody hated him, but he was still in essence a black man. So she's thinking through that relationship.
I don't
So
see them as bears though. I didn't see them as bears. I saw them as more human than animal, even in effect. But I see what you're saying, that even if you take an entirely different being there is something going to be underlying there, but they were still very, very human and
Yeah,
very, very
they're.
male.
I agree with you. They're humanoid, but I think just in the context of the conversations that was happening on TikTok, like you should probably choose an animal over choosing a man, right? And I was trying to apply that to this, like in Jules's the missionaries idea, they are not human. Their bodies, there's nothing human about them, and even when she starts to reveal that she was his wife and they had a kid, and the way he responded and kind of looked at her like you laid down with an animal in his mind, right? So they weren't human because remember, they were always saying you have to preserve the human image. This is the sacred image. And these humanoid beings, just like the Owen Collie, they're humanoids with tentacles. Remind you of the fifth element once we get there. They're not human. And even the non human will come with some type of, problem.
So I just want to, Michelle, you said something that really intrigued me about about women getting beaten and everything, and I go back to the time in which it was written. Women or wives being beaten was very commonplace and very accepted, and it was very much treated as a internal issue. And so if you're surrounded around domestic violence, like they weren't even calling it domestic violence, until I don't know, like in the early 80s or the mid 80s is when you could actually sue your husband, or he could get arrested for that. Like you couldn't, unless you killed somebody, you pretty much was a pat on the back and cool off kind of thing. So that environment, so like being in a relationship, there was always an expectation that that could happen. And there were women who talked about when you get married, like to expect it.
That's true.
So I know that sounds kind of, like I said, I'm older. So like, that sounds kind of cruel or kind of crazy, but that's the truth. It was like, you got a good man if he was not beating you.
Yeah.
Like that's the low threshold. Like if he wasn't beating you or had a family across the way or whatever, like that was like, that's a good man. Or if he brought home all the money, but he wasn't beating you. Or if he beat you, but you didn't have no bruises. Like there was like levels to this that there would be discussions about.
Yeah,
And
I know the historical context.
yeah,
I just felt like that scene was so out of place. And it just made me look, I don't know, it just started to look beyond the characters and really look at Butler and how
yeah.
she writes, and her life experiences. And it just, I felt a little bit sad for her. That's
Wasn't
all.
that scene like a flashback scene?
It was a flashback scene. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so she was being beaten as she was being like taught to accept him in a way. Was that when it
Well,
happened?
they had a disagreement and she had spoken back and he got mad and he hauled off and hit her. It was a couple of times because there was a couple of flashbacks where he did hit her. And then another one was when they went hunting and she was careless and she didn't see the creature that they were hunting or whatever. So he had to kind of come in and save them, but she kind of saved him and
Yeah.
he was pissed because his back was open. And
Yeah.
so he hauled off and hit her.
Okay. Okay. I don't have an answer, but yes, to what they were going through during those times and what was expected and accepted. And now that I think about it, all of her books deal with some type of feminine abuse. Every last one of them. Or corrosion. That word gets me every time. Corrosion. But anyway, okay, overall, we agree that it's not her best, but it is an important text. Jules did hit her at the end. Sir Maxim says that is true. It's like the world is punishing her for doing something different. That is true. We don't like what is different. And generally, and I think, and I don't remember what, if this is a theory or what, but generally it's like generally people try to beat what they see out of someone else that is really within them. So you're literally trying to, you're hitting or you're trying to discriminate against something that's deep seated within yourself. And because you can't express this thing, you want to inflict violence on this other person because they are that thing.
I thought it was really interesting when Jules explained to his wife that I understand if the male missionaries wanted to chase, wanted to chase the female, uh, the female
Barcom,
species. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you, God, kind, thank you. Like like maybe they'll just get a warning. So he wasn't necessarily like he didn't necessarily think that was the right thing to do, but somehow he understood it. But then when it came to the women, hell no, you can't lay down. Like there's no way you could possibly want to do that, and that's like the worst thing ever in life. And it was so like so you're okay with them chasing or sowing their wild oats or whatever, however he named it, and that shocked me. It was like kind of like, why would he like? So he's okay with this part, but I'm gonna give you a warning because they seem to be so open sexually and free and everything else, but we can look the other way. But with women, you better not even think about it.
Yeah, that's misogyny.
Yeah,
That
big
was,
time.
that was very low hanging fruit. I think how I took it is that they were punishing, again, this is another semblance of punishing Black women for surviving, because she literally she did what she did to survive. She doesn't look like any of the missionaries. Jules and her other mother were the only ones to kind of accept her. So she was an outsider, like inside the missionaries and where she was supposed to like live and grow up. When she got taken, she did what she had to do to survive. She was essentially raped the first time she laid down with Dewitt. And like it was something that she had to accept, or she could have been essentially torn apart. She learned to love this man and, to do what it is to be accepted in now her new home, because she didn't know if she would ever see them again. And so, like, each step of the way, she did what she had to do to survive. And it just seems like everybody is trying to punish her for that, which is some of the same things that, I don't know, we kind of see.
Yeah. I think I wanted to say something when Miss Tina was speaking. I was thinking about James Baldwin comments this in Another Country, the essay, when he's talking about how white men were jealous of the sexual prowess or Black men's sexuality. And they hated, one of the reasons that the lynchings in the South were motivated was due to sexuality, not just they feared that Black men were R-ing white women. It was that white women preferred to sleep with these strong Black men. And so one of Baldwin's arguments was that white men were sexually jealous of Black men. And therefore, they wanted to string them up from a poplar tree because of that jealousy. So when Tina was talking about how Jules, was okay in one instance and not the other, also think back to that small scene in Kindred when Rufus was mad that Alice had chose her husband Isaac over him. How dare you choose this Black man over me? Same is true for the white female missionaries, because you remember, it is white women's chastity that had to be protected, the pureness, the purity. And so if these white women missionaries, largely, they had some Black people in there, but it was largely a white missionary camp. So how dare a white woman missionary desire to sleep with the other or the monster, or if we want to read race onto their bodies, you Black person? How dare you prefer them over these upstanding white missionaries who've come to protect your chastity and save the great white race?
But they didn't want Alana.
Alana Black.
Yeah, and she says it in the book that there was nobody there for her.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I didn't understand why Jules, at the end didn't have some understanding of why she was going to stay behind, and his reaction was team too much.
We also have to we also have to think about her proximity to whiteness and his ownership of her as her father. Right? Elena's white, no one Black, nobody, well, she's mixed, Afro Asian. Nobody really wants her. But she is in proximity to whiteness, and she is considered his daughter, therefore also his property. So in some way, you're still white by the rights I give you, Elena.
Or even if he didn't want to say, I think the ownership does come in a kind of like, I took you in, I own you type of thing, even if he didn't fully accept her as a daughter, which I think in some regards he did. And that was just disappointment. But it's even if we look at it in like what it is, he kind of owned her. He took her in, clothed her, fed her. How dare you not abide by my principles, by my rules, by my, to do this abomination? How does that make me look? Kind of like, the PKs that, if you're past this kid and you go ahead and do what you,
They gotta go with the world.
It's the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that we should also remember, like, I think she was gone, 2 years? So before she left, she even decided not to take a mate with the missionaries. This was a decision. So you leave, and people could say, oh, this is Stockholm syndrome, this is all this stuff. But she actually chose to be with this person. And even afterwards, chose him again. That's kind of like a slap in the face, not only to the white race, but also to the human image that they're trying to protect. Okay. Y'all ready to get into some questions, or anybody else got something to say? Anybody else is also free to join the panel. Feel free if you got something to say, you want to hop up here real quick, give your 2 cents or your little TED talk. You're more than welcome. Just click the 2 little people at the bottom of your screen. Okay. Anybody else before we get into the questions? Pachi, you got something?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's get to it. In the last few books, memory has been kind of surfacing in some way, memory. And so I thought it was good to bring up a question, or start with a question on the politics of memory and forgetting. It says survival in Butler's novels often require selective memory, forgetting, or adaptation to new realities. In what ways does Survivor explore the politics of memory, both personal and collective? And how does forgetting function as a survival strategy for Elena? What does this suggest about the legacy of trauma, particularly in relation to diasporic identity? So we're talking about memory here, right? And we can either talk about memory as it relates to the missionaries and their failed attempts to thrive, or we can talk about memory as it relates to collective memory and Black folks.
I think I'm gonna make a comment, an umbrella comment, and then we can do it. I think as it relates to her and the missionaries, at least that's going to be my take. I think again, with any type of trauma and survival, you have to repress in order to go through. And we talked about, in the other books, how memory is fluid and is plastic, and you have to choose to forget sometimes. And I think we see that in various times with Alana. Like, she has to change herself and make herself different things in order to do what she has to do to make it through. And some people that can't do that or won't do that, we see them how they get stuck, kind of like the missionaries. Because they can't adapt, because they can't think anyway, they're delayed, and that hurts them in the end. And I think that's kind of how our minds work. Is frightening, and it's cool at the same time, because I don't know, that's your engine to get through, your ability to forget. But then sometimes you recall, and then, but you can make your mind only recall in like certain areas, or sometimes it comes up like randomly, like how she kind of made it throughout the text.
Yeah.
And I liked how she did that. Like, that it's very, I think that's where Tiffany D. Jackson gets it from, the constant changing of time, and going from the present to the future, or to the past. But I think this is very telling on how our use of memory and or forgetting actually is pushing us forward and helping us through. But at the same time, you do need to remember. because there's some things that she brings up, like, hey, I remember when y'all treated me like this. Y'all wanted to kill me in the wild and thought everybody that was like me, you wanted to break their necks. Now you don't want to look and watch the take on, kill all of the stragglers and survivors of the Garcon. That's convenient. And like all of those things. So she brings up memory quite frequently throughout the text, and I just think that that was very intentional.
Yeah, because one of the reasons why I pose this question is because in the diaspora, all of the books are saying you have to remember, you have to remember. And sure, remembering history is important, right, to understand where we come from and in order also to press forward. But then there are some books that kind of complicate the idea of remembering, right? And how this could be problematic, or it can ultimately keep people, the generation that is alive now, from progressing forward because they're stuck in this feedback loop of what happened in the past. And as it relates to the missionaries, remember, they were patternist slaves. They have a collective memory. And I don't even think Elena's is as deep as Jules and Nyla's is. But they have this missionary memory, this mute memory collectively that I think functions to hinder their plight in space, right? They can't get beyond, in my eyes, what happened to them in patternist society, and so they replicate those same patterns of domination, or try to, but they can't.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like the way that memory was used in this book gave you an example of when someone uses it to adapt and push forward and to change themselves to fit into an environment, but ultimately that change leads them back to their true self, because that's what happened to Alana.
Mhm.
And then when memory causes you to be stunted and replicate and do the same thing over that was done to you, because you're not even thinking about your experiences. You're just, okay, I'm free, and now this is the system I'm used to. I'm just going to go ahead and do the system again, and not even seeing how it's causing you more chaos then it's helping you, right? Because again, I personally believe if the story was finished and completed, that they didn't survive. They made it north and they starved. Like, I just don't think that they survived because they just didn't understand that they were in a new place, and then you are trying to put yourself above the beings that are already exist here on their world, and just not counting them out every minute. Nathan had the audacity to be like, "Oh, let me help you with your arm. Oh, you know how to like put a stunt on it. So you like he's like, I doubt it. Why would you doubt they know how to take care of themselves medically? So I think it's just memory serves to show you how it can go in different directions. The same memory can go, or the same experiences can go in different directions.
Okay. Okay. I think when we're thinking about the missionaries, we also have to remember that generally the understanding goes that enslaved people naturally try to replicate those same systems again that once dominated and enslaved them. And so ultimately, there is a quote in a Butler interview where she says, the missionaries were not adaptive, or they could not survive because what the patterners did, and the patterners could not evolve because they had a progenitor who was not thinking about evolution in a healthy way. And so, if this has been passed down generation to generation, there is actually no way, in my mind, unless the missionaries try something else. And what they tried to ensure their survival was to stay out of the fight and survive. I don't know if that is a good idea or the solution, but that is the solution that they use to ensure that they will continue on. And we don't know if they continue on. We don't meet them again. Just shame. I'll just tell you, we don't see them again in this series until we meet Eli next book, but he's not of that missionary camp. He's of another one. But they create similar hierarchies of domination. And I'm looking at my notes because I actually wrote this. It says, unfortunately, formerly enslaved people, due to mental conditioning, naturally create similar hierarchies of domination for other bodies that loosely mimic their oppressors. Thus, Butler distances Elena from her teachers to begin instructing new Black future epistemologies that are not overshadowed by the baggage of enslavement and displacement. So go ahead, Tina.
I was gonna say, does and I might losing my mind here, but the patternist with Mary, they didn't seem that white supremacy or racism was something, right? So with these missionaries, I see two things. Yes, they were enslaved, and yes, they thought about things from, like you're saying, in terms of the conditioning and everything else. What was really, to me, driving them is white supremacy, because it's like they chunked all that stuff on to her when she first was found. They had all these, they were calling her an animal. They were doing all of this stuff. So the missionaries, beyond being, I've been enslaved before and I want some sort of like trying to take up some of the same systems, it's also then double stacked to me with white supremacy, because that's part of what, they cannot accept that, these other people or these other entities could be it could be intelligent, could be, even though they're having conversations, even though they learned their language, even though they did all of this stuff, it was never enough. And it just reminds me, because that's what white supremacy does. Like, it doesn't matter, how advanced you are or whatever else, because you are this, you can never be me.
Yeah. The not me, right? So
Right.
I think the reason why the patterners didn't have to focus on race is because they were more than human. This construct of race is a human problem, right? And so if you have this hierarchy, because now we are seeing a series hierarchy form. We have the patterners at the top. We understand that the mutes are at the bottom, and then there's a middle group of people who have something more, right? They're called the side cripples. So we have a natural hierarchy, but because the mutes, or the humans, we should say, because they're called the humans in this text, because the humans do not have anything, they don't have those abilities, they have to dominate naturally in terms of race. And so once we start to think about that, of course, naturally, Jules is a white male, straight white male. He should be, by human standards, the cream of the crop, the one who has the most agency, the one who has the most power. But he doesn't, because a multicultural society has risen that has psionic abilities or the gift of telepathy. I think I mentioned this before in another class when we were talking about white trash studies. Do y'all remember that? Did I say this to y'all? And I mentioned the Ozark film series. Anyway, I'll tell you again. White trash studies is a sect of Southern studies in academia. And what the belief is that even if you are not a successful white person, your whiteness is still a currency. And so when we're thinking about maybe Ruth from the Ozarks, if you watch that, those people who lived in the Ozarks were considered white trash. No, you are not wealthy, but you are still seen in society as more valuable than Black people because of your whiteness. So even if you are considered white trash by the study's definition, you're still better, and you're still in a better place to oppress Black folks or Black and brown people because of your whiteness. So when we're seeing Jules, he don't have as my grandma used to say, a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. He's still relying on this whiteness, this mobility that this whiteness still affords, right? That's all he has. And of course, God, his image of the white God in his mind. But yeah. And even when we're thinking about Elena, someone mentioned like you're still calling her animal and all this other stuff. We have to also think about the language that was used during colonial times, and when people were under those structures. Your godly your godly mission was to civilize the barbaric black and brown people. That was your mission. So maybe in a way he did begin to love her, but he also saw it as his duty to civilize this multicultural woman, this mixed race woman, this biracial lady. Do we see the impacts of patternist control on the missionaries? I guess that's leading us into the second question. Before I get there, did anybody else want to answer? Okay. The next question is the aftermath of enslavement. The missionaries and survivor were once enslaved as mutes under the patternist, a past that shapes their behaviors, fears, and governance long after they have gained their freedom. How does Butler explore the psychological, cultural, or social effects of their prior enslavement? Let's go there. How does she explore in this text the psychological, cultural, and social effects of their prior enslavement? And if anyone in the chat wants to come up here and chat, you're more than welcome to come up here with us. Not? Okay.
Okay, say that last part one more time. I'm sorry.
How does Butler explore their psychological, cultural, and social effects of their prior enslavement? So I'm basically asking, how do you see the effects of missionary enslavement show up in this new book? Because we didn't see their impact, the effects of their enslavement in Mind of My Mind. This is the only book that focuses on them.
Well, oh, go ahead. You want to go ahead?
No, you go. You go.
Well, I feel like they developed a culture of if you're not a missionary, then you're other. So they definitely folded into one another and latched onto their mission as an anchor to keep moving forward, which I think anybody who's been through something traumatic when they get out of it would do. They would latch onto something in order to keep themselves upright for the most part. And I think that's what we were seeing, that the religion and them as a group help them to get to a new world and be inspired to build this new world and new set of humans without the patternist. And so they latched onto that for sure and built a culture around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do y'all think that's all they have? Because I'm thinking about this in terms of Black folks today, right? And that kind of points to the second question under here, and I can just read it to tell you what I'm about to build on. She says, the question says, can a group that has lived under total domination ever fully reclaim their autonomy, or does the trauma of enslavement permanently shape their ability to function as free people?
I think no. I think I said this before that you, when you're I guess molded by the machine, right? And you finally get to control the machine. But if that's all you've known, if that's all you've operated in, you're just changing seats. It's still the machine. So we talked about that. I think I talked about that with Mary in terms of Mary and Doro, and what was going on there, that she was still employing her tactics, even though she thought that she could improve, even though she thought that she was an evolved being.
Yeah.
So my thing, if the oppression that you're under is all you've known, you don't know anything outside of that, you haven't been conditioned to think for yourself, you couldn't think for yourself, how could you fathom something else? How could you, that isn't a semblance of what you came through? Because, we change little things here and there. Like, oh, I think, well, everybody should be equal, but there still should be a hierarchy based on money. Or I think that, people with this certain amount of money should make decisions and not this certain amount of money, even though we can allow everybody access. There's always a caveat that is under the same system, even though you're changing the seats, even though you feel like you're doing something better because you're in power. It's not the case, because you have to really divorce from the entire notion of the oppression that you are under, and you can't because you don't know anything else. So
I don't think you can. I think you can do the best that you can under, the system of oppression that and that you have escaped physically, but not mentally. But I don't think you can, unless you know different, do different. And most people who are controlled cannot.
I think that when the oh God, Gorkon, I forgot the leader's name. When he is trying to like talk to Jules and do all the different things, I think that what's most interesting is the inability for Jules, because he's the main person, to be able to see anything good about their structure, their society, how they survived, any of that. It's all like, yeah, you did this, but now let me show you how I'm going to do it, which is how they became addicted to the drug. It was like, I have limited understanding of what's happening, and I have no value for anything that you're talking about. I literally have no value. And now what he's doing is he's measuring all of the difference, the Tekon and the Gorkon, he's measuring them by his standards. Like he cannot look at them beyond that. So I think that with being oppressed, the reason why he can't evolve, and the reason why Ilana was able to move on, or let that go, was she was able to accept, okay, I see the beauty in this, or I see this standard. On a personal note, at one of my marriages, haha, several. So one of my marriages, I was married to a Muslim. And so one of the things that happened when I was in that marriage was a deep appreciation of that faith. So I had to take my Pentecostal Christian religion and like push that to the side, and then be able to say, can you appreciate how this worship is happening? How does this make you like accept it, or be able to look at it and think about it, but not just through the lens of, okay, well, they believe in angels and you believe in angels, or they believe in this and you believe in that, like just really trying to do that. And I think that's what he's not willing to do that. This is the way it's supposed to be, and you guys need to adhere to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Patriarchal, this colonizing, all of that. Like this is it.
Yeah. 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 He could not get that out of his mind. He could not adapt. And of course, that is what happens. When you cannot adapt, you become obsolete. The system will reject you, right? And for them, their a willingness or ability to play by the rules is what kept them alive. Even remember, I was thinking about when Natak Sinat says collect their weapons. They were already useless, right, against us. But collect them, literally collect those tools that you've been working with and thinking that they were going to protect you, and let's do away with them, because they were never protecting you against us. Because the Garkon and the Tikon, well, the Tikon, that's who Natak is with, or the Garkon, that's who Natak is with. Because they're a system. They're non-fighters, they're fighters, they're hunters, they're Tikon Hail, like they are the system. And the system will always win. And you're trying to fight with the weapons from your system, and they will never uphold to this thing, which is why at the end we see Diute saying, just stay out of it. Don't play into the system. You cannot beat this system. This system you don't have cultural reference for it. It will never work for you. Either you have decided that you will no longer assimilate into it. Now it's just time for you to just stay out of it.
I also think what helps Alana survive more than her, inner fighter, her innate being to survive, is the fact that she recognizes when her oppressors are changing, when it's changing hands. She sees things for what they are, whereas the other missionaries could not. No, I'm not on earth anymore. How can you tell me that I'm enslaved? She's like, no, I have a new slave owner. This is how they play, so I'm gonna play it. And I think your ability to see things for what they are helps a lot.
Yeah.
And it's part of the logic that they claim they have.
Yeah, I can see that.
I agree. I was gonna say I agree with Tachi, because I think also Alana's experience helped her. She had a little bit more experience than the missionaries. The missionaries only had the first experience as slaves and then being missionaries. She was a wild girl, then she was a missionary, then she was a prisoner, and then she was someone who was incorporated into the TechCon system, and then she elevated and she kind of became a queen, right? And then she was able to make a decision. She was given the choice to make a decision whether she was going to stay or go. So she just had a lot more experience than they did to see beyond what they couldn't see.
And your point reminds me, there's a line that she says, or that Butler writes, I don't remember if she says it directly out of her mouth, but Butler writes it, that it was best that Elena stopped becoming a missionary altogether. Like, it was early on in the book, you probably didn't catch the passing mention. But when we meet Elena as she's coming back to the missionary settlement, she has already decided that she would not become one of them again. She knew too much. She was too far removed. And in order to fight for them, she could not fight within their system as one of them. So she did have a lot of becomings. And I think in the article that I shared, it was talking about the teleology of catching up. And I do want to read that because that is important. So I'll tell you what it means. It's coined by Mary Louise Pratt, and the framework suggests that independence can only truly be achieved by the completion of developmental processes. Essentially, marginalized people will remain dependent until they are done catching up. And here are my words. To help Elena adapt to the changing world, Butler envisions her ability to use history as a tool for preventing and resisting future oppression. For instance, she signals that she intends to assist Elena in catching up. At the beginning of the narrative, when Elena decides that it is best when we left Earth and settled on our new world, I became something else entirely. So that's on page 42. So early in the narrative, Butler begins to, I argue, kind of critique and acknowledge and critique westernized culture's historical views and controlling images of Black women that originated during the 18th century and 19th century. So I'm talking about the caricatures that Black women are still fighting against, as well as the politics of respectability, which is what you see Jules kind of trying to project at her when she tells him that she was married to him, to the youth, and also that she had a child. And so ultimately, as you said, Maisha, that she went through all of these changes, all of these phases, all of these identities, that's Butler allowing her to catch up so she would never be dependent again.
Yep.
It's very Black. It's very, on theme.
It's on brand.
On brand.
All right. Anybody else before we go? We getting through some questions tonight. I'm proud of us. I am proud of us. Okay, let's go to who ultimately survives in Survivor. The question says, by the end of the novel, Survivor is not just about physical endurance, but about ideological survival, cultural survival, and ethical survival. Who truly survives in the narrative, and at what cost? And how does Butler force us to reconsider the moral implications of survival under oppressive systems? So who really survives, and at what cost?
Lana survived because she was willing to play the game and take on multiple roles in order to survive and ensure the missionary's survival and her husband's survival. So she's the ultimate survivor.
Okay.
I also think there's layers because she exposed the breakage of bondage through the mind. So while she was withdrawing, she was the first to withdraw. She withdraw repeatedly, right? And she was willing to do so, the first person willing to do so. So that's breaking the chains of the mind. Then she was able to physically adapt to whatever environment she was placed in, showing that, okay, with the mind, now the physical follows. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to learn the ways, hurry up, ascend, and then I'd be able, to fight better. I'd be able to survive better. And then she uses her position in order to help others, but she was willing also to lose her quote unquote family, her semblance of a mother and a father. Not everybody can come with you. So you can't be holding on to them and then trying to move forward to survive if they're not willing to survive themselves. So she had to break that. Now she had to break family ties in order to be like, okay, if I'm going to be on this planet, I have to be with the strongest people. Strongest people are my husband. I can't be with y'all because y'all not going to protect me. Y'all never wanted to protect me in the first place.
Come
So I
on,
can't
girl.
be with y'all. You know what I'm saying? I can't be with y'all. I got to be with my man. And yeah, he beat me, but I gotta be with my man. Now, this is not, I said, do it have BDE energy, but he rubbed me the wrong way, after I read the second part. So again, I'm not saying he's a great person. I'm saying in the game of survival, I'm being with the strongest. That's how you play. Y'all think that y'all the strongest because y'all are white and y'all are human. That's clearly not the case. They were mollywopping y'all. Like you needed intervention, and y'all just like, no, I'm gonna make it on my own in the north, and then I'm just gonna bring enough, what was the thing, enough fruit with me so we can survive or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, that a lot of them, I feel like I'm with Maisha. I think they didn't survive because again, a lot of them would not be mentally prepared to withdraw like they had to in order to be mentally free. They still wanted to be in those bondages, they still wanted to be in those chains. So I feel like I agree with Maisha in that she's the ultimate survivor, but because she took the steps and there's very many levels that she took to get there, that just people aren't just willing to.
I think everyone survived in a way, though. She may be the grand mayor of survival, but I think everyone survived. And Joe actually says this in a chat. She says anyone who was willing to walk away. The Garcon who retreated, Elena who knew she couldn't go with the mission, and the mission for leaving the settlement. And so I actually do appreciate that because everyone had to make a decision to survive. And I'm wondering, as you were speaking, Tai Chi, if we think that we can survive in fragments.
So I think that the missionaries did not survive.
They was walking off to the
Yeah, okay, I
She
mean, they
rushed
talked
it. The
about
book ended because she
like,
was tired. We don't know that.
right, okay. So for me, they did. They told him that Duet told him like, if you take the fruit, you're not gonna have the stuff that you need to survive. If you take this fruit, you
That's
will
true.
not have the
but
stuff that
they
you
kept
need to
their human
survive.
image. So they survived. No?
No,
No,
I'm
no,
sorry. He
no.
told them point blank. He was like,
That was
"Look,
good. That was nice. That was
he,
nice.
he,
A very good attempt.
He did not grow abundantly in the north, and he said that to them. Some of them had to go through withdrawal because it wasn't going to be enough. They did.
yeah,
Tina's correct. Tina's
Don't
correct.
kill them. Don't.
They did. They
I'm
did.
sorry, they did not. I'm sorry, the missionaries did not survive.
They
They
did
did
not.
not.
They
And
did
then the
not.
Garcon, they're gonna unless they decide to join the Tekon because they're basically the same race. They're just different tribes. And it felt like they're not gonna survive because they needed to have this blue, and they are incapable of being able to make blue. They're incapable then because the guy was, he was not a true leader in the way that they've done this. So I think the TechCon survived and Alana. Everybody else is
They
out of
would say
there.
they survived patternist enslavement.
I don't
You
care. They
keep
did. They are
trying.
not surviving.
You
I mean,
keep trying to do this. I,
I'm trying,
I
y'all.
guess. I
no.
guess.
This is a
I
different planet,
guess.
different rules, different people, and
Right.
they are already addicted. Addiction is another beast in of itself,
I agree.
and
Right.
they was not going to be making it north without beating that addiction, and they were told, and they left anyway with the little bit that they had. Good luck to them, but they can't adapt in that situation. They will not be able to adapt north.
I mean, they
Can you
found
survive
out.
if your mind is gone?
So that's a question for the next book.
Okay. So here's the other thing. The Garcon had been kidnapping the missionaries
Yeah.
and having them work and breed someplace else.
Yep.
He found out about it.
Yeah.
And they had a whole community that was set up.
Yeah.
They could have said, okay, let's go there because we know that they are at least living there.
No.
They're like, no, we don't want nothing to do with them.
Yeah, because they're now hybrid bodies.
Yeah, they are no longer what we're looking for or whatever else. So no, and I mean, he told them you go north, it's going to be dangerous. That fruit's not going to be there. You need to really take a lot of stuff in order to be there. You've got other enemies that are there. They're going to be other wild animals. He told them all of that. They're like, yeah, but we need this fruit. We can't make it without it.
Hold on, y'all. I'm telling me my live on end in 5 minutes. I don't know why it would do that. Okay, we're back. Okay. Okay. I'm trying to find a redeeming quality somewhere.
No, they gone. I'm sorry. I would the mission. I'm like with her like they gone. They dead.
I think in this simpler context of this book, we can quickly wash it, but I think in the deeper complexities and nuances of how we live as humans here on earth, you might can make an argument for, survival in fragments. Might can. Because I don't think any of us are truly free.
No,
But
in fragments of you,
I
pieces
think
of
you
you
can
will
make it
survive. You will
right.
not come
Pieces
back
of
to
you
your whole
will. You're
state.
not fully liberated. This whole thing. So in the grand scheme of things, I can see that argument. But in this very laid out simple text, it's a wash. Like it's a wash.
Also, in the sci-fi world, because I love science fiction, usually when humans are on another planet and they don't adapt quickly and they don't do what they're supposed to do and they get caught up, they end up dying off quickly. So again, I think they are no more. They probably lasted a little bit, and then those who did survive probably came back down and joined with the people on the planet because that would have made the most sense.
I tried. I'm outnumbered. Okay. Anybody else want to go before we go to the next one? Because I also don't. No, I ain't done. See, I be saying I'm done. I ain't done. So because I'm also thinking about, we're talking about Elena surviving and adapting. Some things don't survive. And I guess that is okay in the grand scheme of things when we're thinking about some things can't go with you, right? She does have to shed certain layers of herself. But I don't think, now that I'm thinking about it, like it is this Afrofuturist text. That's what I originally argued. But I don't know how much of her survives. I don't know.
I think that with her, the con people, the tech con people, I think the reason why she was able to um adjust it because she first started, I'm gonna do just like I did when I met the missionaries. I just want a safe place to stay or whatever else. But I think that she felt like they accepted her for who she was, like
Yeah, that's the
accepted her, like there was a place for her if she never proved herself to be a hunter or if she never proved herself whatever else, there was still a place for her. Whereas with the missionaries, she knew I had to pretend like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid and I'm in lockstep with you in order to be accepted, because otherwise she was even if she did all of that, she was still ostracized, she was still the other. Whereas with the con, it seemed as if they were curious about her, but they treated her like, okay, well, you don't have blue, but you got this other thing, or you have this, and we can accept this, or we can deal with that. And I think the reason why she wanted to stay was that she probably felt more of herself, like this wild, because she was wild. She said, on earth, I was wild, I was all this kind of stuff. And I had to suppress that in order to be able to, like, to live in that community. I had to be something else.
I agree because she does say it in the last 4 pages, like that she was able to be who she really was, which was a wild girl, a survivor of a wild girl. And with the TechCon, she was allowed to be her true self. So I think that she survived because she was able to be who she authentically thought she was with those people and not the missionaries.
Okay. All right. I don't got no. All right. Y'all won. Okay. I can see that. I'm just trying to find something. Something. Okay. Let's see how much time we got. We got 20 minutes. All right. Let's go to. Let's go to cultural assimilation versus cultural resistance. Okay. And again, if anybody is in the chat, want to pop up here and say, yo, give us your 2 cents, you are more than welcome. Just click the 2 people at the bottom and we will welcome you to the chat. Someone said it's the Doro Hate group all over again. No. They ain't running the stand account today. All right. Elena must negotiate her identity between multiple cultures, the human missionaries, the Khan, and the Tikon. How does Butler explore the tensions between assimilation and resistance? And does Elena's adaptation to the Tikon culture reflect? Oh, we already said that. So don't worry about that one. Let's go with the role of language and communication in power dynamics. Language is a critical tool for survival, integration, and control in Survivor. How does Butler use language, both spoken and unspoken, to emphasize power shifts? And how does Elena's ability or inability to communicate in different cultural contexts reflect the real world consequences of linguistic dominance and marginalization?
One, I love this question. Two, I love how she did it. Even though the book was rushed, I love the use of colors to depict emotion, because sometimes things get lost in translation. There is not a direct translation in certain languages for the things that, for certain emotions, or words for certain emotions. So I love this. I'm not a full polyglot, but I do speak 3, and I love the use of color, because that can, I don't know, when your mind is changing into different languages and you don't quite know what to say, a flash of yellow, that would be fire. Anyway, she did her big one. So I think that the ability, like when DeWitt was first teaching her, I think that's the best example that I can think of. When DeWitt was first teaching her how to read the color, I think her not knowing, when they're just like randomly flashing colors through the compound or whatever to signal when someone's coming, when there's an intruder, her inability to read that would have cost her something. And I think it's just it's one of the depictions of like the question, like, hey, you not speaking somebody else's language, or learning that custom and learning that language, even in the hierarchy of the same, I guess, race, whether it be human race or like color, is important. It can be detrimental to your survival. So the fact that, she learned really quickly and she wanted to know, and she could read him, and like, when he was amused versus when he was angry versus, there were places where she could interject to kind of calm them down or kind of switch the narrative, because she could read them in that way, in their color, in their language. And she was helping like prep Jules and like let him know what was going on so they didn't offend, because that would have been it. That was essential to the survival of the missionaries. It would have been a McDonald's snack wrap if she didn't do that. And so that, I think, was essential. And it's just, I think, especially as we are as Americans, I hate putting this on Americans, but we're like the biggest culprit when we go out and learn different cultures. I think that it's very instrumental in how you get around and assessing safety and doing all that other things. You have to learn, you have to adapt. It can't be beneath you because you think you're higher. Safety.
I had that culture shock that you're speaking about, and even that sense of superiority when I visited Amsterdam for the first time. And of course, you're like, okay, I'm in Amsterdam, cool. And I'm walking the streets and I'm looking, I don't remember what I needed to ask somebody, but I asked a Black person and I assumed he spoke English, and he started speaking Dutch. And I was like, I cannot communicate across this language barrier. Like, here I am coming into your place, assuming that my dominant language is the language of the people, right? And I realized that you were arrogant to think that, right? And that's why I really like how Butler deals with literacy, because she dealt with literacy with the patternist, right? When she's Mary is replacing history books with the patternist literacy. As well as here, like, you cannot communicate against cultural barriers. I mean, you can't communicate over them. If you cannot, well, you need to be able to. If you cannot, then you're in trouble. Then you run the risk of offending someone and then nothing gets done. And so as Taiji said, like if we had a universal like color and everybody knew if someone flashes white, they're what is that, amusement? Or if someone flashes yellow, they mad.
Yeah, white was amusement. I think yellow, near yellow was death. It was like a faded yellow. But then another yellow was like anger or annoyance. And then blue was like dominance, like they were about to go at it, or they wanted to flex, so everybody would be blued out. And then green, and then there was like a neutral color, and then there was a green.
Yeah.
Um, that was so dope. Oh yeah, I think Maisha said yellow is pain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that would help. Anybody else want to go? Literacy. What was the question? How does Butler use language, both spoken and unspoken, to emphasize power shifts? And we also should remember that it doesn't even have to, when we're thinking about in just human society, we communicate. Majority of the communication is nonverbal. It is what you don't say. It is your body language, and it's important. Those are indicators. Those are conversations as well. And when we're thinking about in the African American tradition, a lot of the communications did not happen orally. They happened through song, through dance. They happened through quilting. That was a way to tell a story, and this was also a way to preserve culture. And so these literate texts, we can call them, or in the survivor's case, these are literate bodies. Hold on, let me bring somebody up. These are literate bodies. They are helping bridge the cultural divides.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was that the missionaries knew that the Gorkhans could be transparent, like they could camouflage themselves in a room, and you knew that they were doing this, but you still refused to learn their language. You still refuse to learn their customs or whatever else. And they literally were like all over the place watching everything you did before it became very clear that you were their slaves, or you were and to do that, as soon as you found out that they could camouflage themselves, you were like still resistant to learning the language. Like they did not want to do that. I think somebody in the chat said that Jules got mad when he found out that she had taught them English. It's like, what do you do? Like, I want there to be disrespect, misunderstanding, non-communication. I don't want there to be any kind of us coming together at all. And I just want to be able to take advantage of what I think is more superior. So that just, I don't know, that it was I was like, my God, we keep saying he's a missionary, but I kept thinking, you just colonizer. Like, damn, dude, like something. I mean, like I can't imagine being someplace immersed in another planet with a new species and not wanting to learn the language or customs.
That's why they died. That's
Yep,
why.
exactly.
Because
We
you
don't know they died.
They
anyway. So
died.
they are, when you are unwilling to adapt, right? You can't survive. They couldn't even take the time to get to know who these other people were. They could be your enemy, and they were, but you know nothing about them. But in terms of communication, I love the parts where they did not communicate, the moments when they were quiet, because through those quiet moments when questions were being asked and their life was in danger, and they had to make Alana had to make the right decisions. She chose to stay quiet, and that was a communication in of itself. And it was something that she did, and Doit did, and I think Jules did too, a little bit.
Okay. Lactose intolerant.
Yeah, so
Hey.
I read this article called Negotiating Genre and Captivity in Octavia Butler's Survivor by Troy Holmgren. Maybe I'll put it in the chat later. But it was comparing Survivor to Native American captive stories, kind of from early American history. And one thing they talked about with the language was that these quote unquote white European captives who learned natives language were then able, and usually women, they were focusing on women in this instance, were able then to use that like bilingualism to create a position of power, or just even a position that was kind of outside these like traditional female norms. So I just thought that was a really like interesting parallel here where Alana is able to kind of learn these languages and then use that as leverage to gain more accessibility or more power or, you know, whatever it is that she's looking for.
I also love the fact that their fighting was silent. I love that. I love that she did that. No one made a sound. It's just bodies were dropping, and then people came back red. Loved it. Great. 10 stars.
But you know what? Now you say that, and I'm thinking about it. Generally, the real fighting, the systemic, right? This is a system fighting, and I'm going back to that because this is what I'm thinking about now. You don't see the system fighting.
Correct.
All you see, as you said, are the bodies dropping as a result of this system working. So, yeah, I like, now that I'm talking more about this text, I actually do like it. I do. It was a little off-putting, like I said at first, because I'm not the Star Trek girl, but I do kind of like it.
I feel like we like it now the more that we're talking about because we're fleshing it out because we've read the other text. But I feel like if you read it as is, you be like, what is this? When you compare it to, you know, what we have gotten, and you be like, what is this? But the fact that we're the ones drawing stuff out of it, and I think that's what's helping.
Yeah, that is what's helping. I am very interested in hearing what y'all think about Clay's arc next week. Do anybody want to say anything? We have a few minutes. I don't even want to get into another question. We probably won't have enough time to talk about it. Anybody want to do any closing thoughts? I can share some thoughts about to help us bridge the gap between Survivor and Clay's arc next week, but I'd love to hear from y'all. Anything y'all want to say before we get off?
Overall, it was a good book, unfinished, but it was a good book. I liked it because I like sci-fi, but it was a good book. I think it's really going to help with Clay's arc because I read that and I don't remember anything except being confused. And that was 20 years ago. So I'm looking forward to reading Clay's arc after this one.
And I'm looking forward to hearing what you think about it now that you have read this one and you're reading everything in order. I am interested. Okay, anybody else? Joe said, if this was the first Octavia Butler book I read, I probably wouldn't read anything else from her. That's how I felt about Parable of the Sower. I wouldn't have touched another book. Absolutely not. No. Okay, so we're talking about Clay's arc next week. In Butler's notes, she's talking about an alien organism that comes to Earth, and we know this, we understand this. But what she wanted to explore in this book was what happens when we let the animalistic nature within us take over. What does this mean for civilized societies? And what happens when the human is allowed to be in their most primal state? I think that's something that we should always keep in mind. As far as Clay's arc, I haven't looked at the research recently, but I don't think any article has been published on this book. And I think it's because Survivor is not there. I think it's because we make a drastic jump to Survivor. I'll read something here from my notes from Butler's Hornington archive. She said, I noticed that in her archive, she researched a few things that you'll start to see these things pop up in the text. She researched leukemia, artificial limbs, cancer, non-traditional holistic methods such as acupuncture, guided imagery, massage, yoga, psychic healing, herbalism, hypnosis, and Indian fold medicine, as well as immune system rejuvenation. In her notes, she says that Clay's arc, which also deals with isolated people and a dangerous disease, has two groups confront one another. Each group has the disease. Each is driven to spread it, though neither wishes to spread it. One group chooses to spread it. Let me stop reading there. One thing, another thing that she deeply, deeply studied was the HeLa cells, and you would begin to see why. She studied Henrietta Lacks in the book. Someone asked me, I think this was an email, asked me who Phyllis was, I think. And I think because in the beginning of the Clay's Arc book, Butler actually dedicates it to Phyllis. Yeah, she said in memory of Phyllis White. Phyllis was Butler's friend who was dying of cancer as she was writing it. So she allowed Phyllis to read this book before she passed away. And it was kind of her gift to her in a way to kind of make cancer, these are Butler's words, not mine, find a way to make cancer sexy. Yeah. So let me read you something from the published work. It is a virus, and I would have thought when we were in the pandemic and people were returning to Parable of the Sower, I thought they would have returned to Clay's Arc because it deals with a virus, right? But they didn't. We returned to Parable of the Sower, and that could be because we were under the first Trump administration, and the political landscape of make America great again probably prompted that turn. But I thought we would have turned to a book that dealt with the virus because we were dealing with the virus. One thing I also want to say that Clay's Arc was entitled Manna. I think Butler has this interesting love-hate relationship with
With
biblical.
the Bible, yeah.
Because I didn't say this, but Survivor was once originally titled Canaan. So we had Canaan for Survivor, Manna for Clay's Arc. She's working through some religious trauma. Let's see. What should we say? She says that in her notes that Clay's Arc is an if this goes on story, not creating a new social system or reviving an old one, but continuing and adapting to one we have to developing conditions, technological advancements, economic labor chaos, environmental problems, and social backwardness. Okay, so I'm going to read here because we have 2 more minutes and then we're going to hop off. The author, this interview was in 1988. Clay's Arc was published in 1984. And the interviewer says, the disease described in Clay's Arc seems oddly prophetic, given what has happened with AIDS. Had you heard of AIDS when you wrote that book? Butler says, no, I didn't hear of AIDS until later. The disease I wrote about was based on rabies, which I had read about in old books of mine. I was fascinated by the fact that one of the side effects of rabies is a briefly heightened sensitivity. I always thought it would be great to contract a disease that was both contagious and a real physical boost. So in Clay's Arc, I wrote about a disease that would be great for you if you survived it. That's it. So we're getting into the world of contagion.
I'm excited. This is my wheelhouse. I'm excited.
And also as you're reading the first part, I want you to think about, we saw the missionaries wanting to preserve the human image. You will notice there is a line when in Survivor, in Clay's Arc, and I don't want you to miss it, where Butler literally says that Eli was a childhood missionary, a Baptist pastor. So as you start to think through some of his decision making and some of his comments, I want you to keep in mind that he was socialized as a missionary. It wasn't the missionary group that we see in Survivor, but there were other missionary groups going off to other planets. He was conditioned to try to kind of preserve this image, even when this virus is insisting something else. Okay? Whew. All right, y'all. Well, it's 7:30. It is 7:30. If y'all don't have any questions, the Clay's Arc discussion questions will drop tomorrow morning. They're already scheduled to be released. don't read them until after, yeah, don't read them until after you read the text or the parts that we're reading. If you don't have the Seed to Harvest book and you're not looking at the syllabus, because the syllabus has the breakdown, y'all, you are to complete part 2, if I'm not mistaken. Let me give it to you so that y'all won't have to email me and ask me, when are we supposed to stop? Complete part 2. So if you're listening to the audio book, they should say part 3, and then you stop before part 3. Okay. So complete part 2 if you have the Seed to Harvest book, page 457 through 539. Other than that, I will see y'all next Wednesday as we work through Clay's arc. We only have one book after this, and we're done with the series. Okay, y'all, good chat. Good night. And also, I want to encourage people who are not generally up on the panel. We have way more room for you. Feel free to hop up here and chat with us. Okay? All right, y'all. Of course. Good night, y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Tachi. Bye.
Bye, Maisha. Bye, Tina. Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye, Tati. Bye-bye.